In today's video, we're going to have an in-depth look of how to do the SUI hero, hero dive, suicide hero, or honestly whatever else you want to call it. If that sounds like fun to you guys, let's get into it. Really quickly before we get further into the video, I want you to imagine that you're in a math class. First, the teacher is going to give you a full lesson, and then you guys are going to be doing a lot of practices and examples and stuff like that. This video is going to be the lesson, and then part 2 is going to be out tomorrow, and that's going to be the examples and the practice. So I really strongly suggest that you go over the entire lesson, even though it may be slightly boring, because it will teach you how to do a SUI very well. And then tomorrow, that's when we're going to be doing the live attacks, examples, etc. Now, the first thing I want to go over is going to be the funneling troops. So we have Sneaky Goblins, Super Barbarians, we have a Giant Wizard combo, we have a 2 Balloon combo, we have a 1 Loon, 1 Minion combo, we have a Yeti, we have a Baby Dragon, we have, small troops like Minions, Barbarians, and Archers. And you have to understand how each one of these is used, and I'm going to explain that right now. So first of all, for Sneaky Goblins, you can use them on like resources. They're most effective on resources, obviously. This is unfortunately Town Hall 11 and up, but typically on pumps, collectors, and mines you can just use 1, and then on storages you can use 2 to 3 depending on if they're deeper in the base and stuff like that. Super Barbarians are, in my opinion, a very underrated troop actually for funneling. You can typically use them on very low HP buildings, and because of their range they'll pretty much always be able to take down that building, and sometimes even 2. Now, one thing I do want to mention about the Super Barbarian is that you shouldn't use an extremely high DPS area. Even though it is pretty bulky for just 5 space, it's not as bulky as like a Giant, for example. So it can't quite withstand all that very high DPS, but in range of like 1 or 2 Archer Towers or something like that, it can still take down a Knight's building, which can have a very nice and cheap funnel. So then we have 2 Loons. Now this is just something to take down defenses, like Archer Towers, cannons on the outside of the base. But if there's a mortar, you can typically just get away with using 1 Loon and 1 Minion. If the balloon gets 1 shot off and then drops, it's going to be within 1 shot range of a Minion. So if that bomb tower is like slightly more inside the base or protected by some trash buildings, then it's best to just go safe and use 2 balloons. Now next we have the Yeti. This is not used too much, but it can have its uses. So typically we're going to use on the edge, obviously, to funnel, and it can destroy quite a bit of buildings under decent DPS. And the good thing about this troop is that it can also take down a defense usually, even if it's not specifically targeting a defense, because of the Yeti mites. So it can be useful in certain situations. Now next we have the Baby Dragon, which is one of the most versatile, one of the best, and one of the most used funneling troop. So a few key points. So first of all, don't use them near air defenses. It can take down many buildings really quickly as long as it's not like next to another air troop. So don't use 1, or don't use 2 or don't put it next to a minion, because that range effects is kind of like what makes it so amazing. And for just 10 space, it's a very good funneling option most of the time. Now, if the place is, has a lot of buildings and there aren't any air defenses to protect that place, it might be worth it to use a Cocoon or something like that to make sure that there isn't a black air mine to snipe down your Baby Dragon. Because remember, a Baby Dragon can get a lot of value if it's used correctly. And next we have small troops like Barbarians, Archers, Minions, that kind of thing. These honestly don't really have that much use, but if there's, a building with very low DPS, like a builder hut, you can use it, and there's like no defenses at all because they can't like take a single shot. There's also a Giant Wizard combination, and this is pretty much the same thing as a Super Barbarian. Like, it really isn't, but it gives kind of a very similar effect. It can take down a couple buildings under like low DPS. If it's high DPS, it can still take down like 1 or 2, but it won't take down that much, and you should probably use this on more low DPS or low HP buildings instead. This is just for like Town Hall 9 and 10. So those are the funneling troops, and next I want to go over the support troops and spells. Now I know this might be a little bit boring, but this is very important to know because you need to know each one of these things if you're going to be doing a SUI properly. So for support troops we have Golems, Giants, Ice Golems, a Skeleton spell, Headhunters, Wall Breakers, Super Wall Breakers, Invisibility, Freeze, and Poison. So for Giants, this is mostly for Town Hall 9 to 10, and you can use it just to tank a little bit. So if you're entering a high DPS area, for example, you might want to use a few Giants just to let your SUI go for a little bit longer. Then we have a Golem, which is just more tanky and stronger, so if it's like a more high DPS area, just make sure that you're not going into a single Inferno Tower or something like that with a Golem. Now the Ice Golem, that's really the most common troop, it's Town Hall 11 and up obviously, but if you're Town Hall 11 or 12, it's a very, very viable option when you're doing SUI hero. So take a look at these examples. So here we see an Ice Golem tanking for our king and queen while approaching a high DPS area. Then here, as you can see, once the CC was lured, the Ice Golem stepped into the high DPS area and died. Since it died, it got insane freeze value by freezing enemy queen, CC, warden altar, and bomb tower. This allowed for our heroes more time to get buildings and targets. So next we have a skeleton spell. Now this provides tanking for troops by essentially distracting buildings, but they become pretty useful when they're next to a multi-target inferno tower, because they can just kind of take all of them down really quickly and then the defense will just switch onto your heroes once again. But if you're going to a place with a lot of single target defenses, then it can be a very viable tank. Then we have Headhunters, Town Hall 12, obviously you probably know how to use them. It's just when you're approaching a hero, you just send 1 or 2 of them in and they're going to help you out a ton. We have super wall breakers. This is just to break walls, Town Hall 11 up, and then regular wall breakers for Town Hall 10 and below. So invisibility can be used to protect your troops, to relieve some DPS off of them obviously, and most notably like single inferno towers. You know, the invisible can render them useless for a bit of time. And then another important use of the invisibility spell is that it can make something like a defense invisible, so that you can make your heroes target something else, or your intended target from your SUI. Then the freeze is just helpful for relieving high DPS off your heroes, because if there's like an expo farm or something like that, you might want to freeze it up to allow your heroes a bit more time to do whatever. It might also be useful to freeze the CC sometimes. And then the poison, it's pretty obvious, you just use on the CC troops. At Town Hall 11 plus, if it's a super minion and Headhunter CC, it might even be useful to use 2 poison spells. And when you're doing a SUI, there's a couple things that you always have to look out for. You have to realize that it's not, it's not like a queen charge where you have healers healing them up. It can't go that far into the base. So one of the main things you have to look out for are baits. Baits are really common in like esports spaces and that kind of thing. So typically if you see like a queen, a clan castle, a high value defense all together, oftentimes next to like high HP buildings, such as storages, and there's a bunch of 2-tile gaps near them, that might be a bunch of like big bombs or Teslas. You might want to avoid doing a SUI into that area because it's probably baited. So for example, this area, it seems nice to SUI, but it's clearly baited, and if you were to try and SUI in this area, heroes would likely get destroyed before they reach their intended target. So this is pretty similar to the one above, baited areas, but it's just very high DPS areas. So it's probably not an amazing idea to, do a SUI into a massive expo farm or a place, just a very high DPS area, single inferno towers, expo farms, that kind of thing. It's probably really hard to SUI into there and realize that it's usually just king, queen, and maybe a couple support troops. It's not actually that strong. And then another thing is just going to be a hard funnel area. Now this is personal. You're going to know how good you are at funneling troops, and if you're really good at funneling troops, then this isn't something you have to worry about too much. But SUI, oftentimes like the cornerstone of your attack, and if you mess up on it, then your whole attack is ruined. And so if you mess up on or if you choose to send your SUI into a place and then just aren't able to funnel into there, that really might mess up your entire attack. So make sure it's a place that you truly believe you could funnel properly. So finally, how to actually perform the SUI. This is probably the part you were waiting for once we went all over that. So now that we've actually done this, let's go over how to actually perform the SUI. So first and foremost, you have to decide your SUI hero objectives. If you're doing a SUI Lalo, maybe it's going to be to get some nice pathing, take down CC, and get a valuable defense. It's really dependent on what attack strategy you're using, what the base is, that kind of thing. Something I do want to mention is in attacks like where the SUI is the main thing, such as SUI Lalo, it's pretty normal to invest more into the actual SUI because it needs to get a bit more value, and it's kind of like the deciding factor whether like it's going to decide your Lalo pathing, that kind of thing. But obviously still don't go overboard. In attacks where the SUI is a small portion, like a Blizzard Lalo, first you have to send in your Blizzard and then you do a tiny little SUI and then you send in your Lalo. You don't have to invest quite as much. You can usually just send in your heroes alone to get a valuable defense or something like that. So once you've decided all that, you need to analyze the base to see which funneling troops you need to use, but try to use as little as possible while still maintaining, a safe funnel to ensure that your heroes do in fact go into the base. Then just analyze the support troops you need. For example, if you're going to be SUIing into a place where there is going to be a king, it's going to be valuable to use a headhunter, or if you know that there's going to be a single inferno tower, it might be useful to bring in maybe a skeleton spell, maybe ice hound, or not ice hound, ice golem, or something like that. So really it's all dependent on the base. There's not really a set formula. Then send in your heroes and support troops once the funnel has been created, and then you watch the SUI very closely and once again use the spells and support troops when necessary. Really quickly, imagine that you're in math class. First, the teacher is going to give you the lesson, give you all the boring stuff, and then you have to go and practice it. So this video, that was the lesson, that was all the boring stuff, and then part 2, which is going to be out tomorrow, is going to be all the examples, all the practice, and that's also very important. But you can't really do one without the other. So I suggest you watch both the videos. The part 2 is going to be out tomorrow, and it's going to be purely example after example, from Town Hall 9 to Town Hall 12, and it's going to be teaching you guys how to do these, but I'll be doing it in practice so that you can actually see it live. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, because I put Clash Clans content every single day at 2 p.m, and comment what you want to see next. Thanks for watching, and see you guys next time.